The HOA secretly put cameras in our yard. Now they owe us $1 million. They spied on us, ignored privacy laws, and even let strangers access our footage, all without our consent. But we exposed their corruption, took them to court, and now? Their president resigned in disgrace, their board was overthrown, and they're paying us $1 million in damages. They thought they controlled us. Now they're the ones paying the price. When Harry and Naomi first drove down Maplewood Lane, they felt like they had stepped into a postcard. The lawns were manicured, the houses were uniform yet charming, and the entire neighborhood had an air of order and tranquility. This was exactly what they had dreamed of, a safe, quiet community where they could build their lives together. Their new house was everything they had hoped for, a cozy two-story home with a spacious backyard, perfect for summer barbecues and lazy Sunday afternoons. The street was lined with friendly neighbors who waved as they passed by. Within days of moving in, they had received freshly baked cookies from the Smiths next door and a polite, official-looking welcome packet from the Maplewood Homeowners Association, HOA. At first, the HOA seemed harmless, just a group ensuring the community stayed neat and organized. They had rules about lawn maintenance, mailbox designs, and holiday decorations, but nothing that seemed unreasonable. Naomi even laughed when she read a guideline about only white or beige curtains visible from the street. It was strict, sure, but they didn't mind. After all, that orderly charm was part of what made the neighborhood feel so perfect. For the first year, life in Maplewood was everything they had hoped for. Lazy summer evenings grilling in the backyard, morning walks through the quiet streets, and friendly small talk with neighbors at the local farmers market. Harry had even joined the neighborhood's Saturday morning basketball group, while Naomi started gardening in their backyard. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, where kids rode their bikes safely, and where nothing ever seemed out of place. But that was before they noticed the camera. It was a perfect Saturday afternoon, the kind Harry and Naomi had come to love since moving to Maplewood. The sun was shining, the air smelled like freshly cut grass, and Harry stood by the grill, flipping burgers while Naomi tended to her flower beds. Then, something caught his eye. Near the corner of their yard, mounted high on the HOA-owned fence, was a small metallic device. At first, Harry thought it might be a weather sensor or some kind of wildlife tracker. But the more he looked, the less familiar it seemed. "Naomi, come here for a second," he called, setting down his spatula. Naomi wiped her hands on her jeans and walked over, squinting up at the object. "What is that?" she asked. "I'm not sure," Harry said, stepping closer. "But it looks like a camera." The word hung in the air for a moment. Naomi's expression shifted from curious to concerned. "Why would there be a camera back here?" she asked, folding her arms. Harry had the same question. From where it was positioned, it had a clear view of their entire backyard, the grill, the patio, even the hammock where Naomi liked to read. That didn't sit right with him. Determined to get a closer look, Harry went inside, grabbed a stepladder and a pair of pliers, and returned to the fence. Naomi stayed below, watching with growing unease as he climbed up. From this angle, there was no mistaking it. The device was a security camera, equipped with a motion sensor, a wide-angle lens, and a small antenna for wireless connectivity. "This is definitely a camera," Harry confirmed. "And it's pointed right at us." Naomi's stomach twisted. Who would put a camera here? And why? Harry had no idea, but one thing was certain, they needed to find out. Their first stop was Tom and Lisa, the older couple next door who had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade. If anyone knew what was going on, it was them. As they stood on the front porch, Tom answered the door, sipping from a glass of iced tea. "Hey there, neighbors. What's up?" Harry cut straight to the point. "Tom, have you noticed the camera on the HOA fence?" Tom let out a small sigh and nodded. "Yeah, we've got one too. They put it up last month." Naomi's eyebrows shot up. "They? Who's they?" "The Homeowners Association," Lisa chimed in from inside the house. "Teresa, the president, said it's part of some new security initiative. Something about preventing vandalism and keeping an eye on trespassers." Harry and Naomi exchanged a glance. This was the first time they were hearing about any security initiative. "Did they ask for your permission?" Harry asked. Tom shook his head. "Nope. Just sent out a newsletter about it. Didn't think it was worth fighting over, but I can see why you'd be upset." That response didn't sit well with Harry or Naomi. No one had asked them if they were okay with a camera watching their backyard. Next, they crossed the street to talk to the Smiths, a younger couple with 2 small kids. If anyone else had concerns, it would be them. "Yeah, we saw them go up," Mr. Smith said, leaning against his front door. But we thought they were just dummy cameras, just to scare people off. Mrs. Smith looked visibly uncomfortable. But if they're actually recording, that's really creepy. That was an understatement. The more they talked to their neighbors, the more unsettling the pattern became. Some didn't care, some hadn't noticed, but others were clearly uncomfortable. By the end of the day, Harry and Naomi knew one thing for sure. The HOA had installed surveillance cameras without telling anyone, and that was a problem. A big problem. Harry and Naomi sat in their living room that evening, sifting through the old newsletters and emails from the HOA. Nowhere did it mention that security cameras would be installed in private-facing areas. The closest thing they found was a vague line in a 2-month-old newsletter. As part of our ongoing commitment to community safety, the HOA will be installing security devices in public areas. Naomi frowned, tapping the paper. This isn't a public area. Our backyard is private property. Harry nodded, frustration growing. They knew what they were doing. They worded it just enough to sound harmless while avoiding any real details. Determined to get answers, they started talking to more neighbors the next day. The responses were mixed. Some shrugged it off, saying they trusted the HOA to handle security. Others admitted they didn't like it but didn't want to start trouble. Then there were those, like Cynthia Matthews, the elderly woman next door, who were outright angry. I called Teresa the minute I saw that thing go up, Cynthia said, her wrinkled hands gripping a cup of tea. She told me it was for security. I told her I don't feel very secure knowing someone's watching me water my plants. More and more, Harry and Naomi realized that the HOA had not asked anyone's permission. They had simply done it and assumed no one would fight back. That changed at the next HOA meeting. Held in the local community center, the monthly meetings were usually quiet affairs with only a handful of residents attending. But this time, the room was fuller than usual. Clearly, the news about the cameras had spread. At the front of the room, Teresa Carter, the HOA president, stood with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged before. She was a woman in her late 50s, always impeccably dressed, always speaking in a tone that made it clear she was used to getting her way. During the open floor session, Harry raised his hand. Teresa acknowledged him with a polished smile. "Mr. Bennett, what can we help you with?" Harry stood. "We noticed a security camera mounted on the HOA fence in our backyard. It's pointed directly at our property. Can you explain why it's there?" The room fell silent. Teresa didn't blink. "Of course," she said smoothly. "As noted in our newsletter, the cameras are part of our new security initiative. They're strategically placed to monitor key areas of the neighborhood." "Our backyard isn't a key area," Naomi interjected. "It's private property." Teresa's expression didn't change, but there was a slight shift in her tone. "The cameras are mounted on HOA-owned fences and are positioned to ensure comprehensive coverage of the community. I assure you this is for the safety of all residents." Harry narrowed his eyes. "Then why weren't homeowners consulted?" "We didn't give permission for a camera to record our backyard." Now Teresa's voice cooled. "The HOA has the authority to implement measures that benefit the community as a whole. If you're concerned about privacy, I'd suggest ensuring your yard complies with our visibility standards." Naomi's jaw dropped. "Visibility standards? Are you saying it's our fault for not having a tall enough fence?" "I'm saying," Teresa said curtly, "that the cameras are non-invasive and entirely within the HOA's rights. If you have further concerns, you're welcome to submit them in writing." That was it. Discussion over. Harry and Naomi left the meeting feeling frustrated and powerless. But they knew one thing. Teresa had no intention of backing down. If they wanted answers, they would have to take this fight further. Harry couldn't sleep that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the HOA meeting in his mind. Teresa's dismissive tone, the way she had brushed them off like they were children questioning authority, it all sat wrong with him. Naomi, curled up beside him, wasn't asleep either. "She knows exactly what she's doing," she murmured. "She just doesn't think anyone will fight back." Harry exhaled sharply. Then she's about to be very surprised. The next morning, Naomi gathered every HOA newsletter, email, and document they had received since moving in. They combed through them, looking for any small mention of cameras, surveillance, or privacy policies. Nothing. The closest thing they found was the same vague note they had seen before about security devices in public areas. But that was it. No mention of cameras. No details. No approval process. It was deliberate. The HOA had intentionally avoided transparency, knowing most homeowners would either ignore the newsletters or assume everything was fine. Frustrated, Harry decided to dig deeper. He called his old friend, Ethan, a software engineer who had helped him set up their home's Wi-Fi network when they first moved in. "Hey, man," Harry said, after explaining the situation. "I need to know where those cameras are sending footage. Can you help?" Ethan didn't even hesitate. "Give me an hour." That evening, Ethan showed up at their house with his laptop. He stood in the backyard, eyeing the camera on the fence. "Yeah, this thing's definitely active," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. He pulled out a small device from his bag. "I'm gonna run a network scan. If these cameras are wireless, they have to be connected to something." Harry and Naomi watched as Ethan worked. A few minutes later, he let out a low whistle. "Got it. The cameras are transmitting data to a remote server. But here's the problem. This server has almost zero security. No firewall, no encryption, nothing." He turned his screen so they could see. "Anyone with the right URL can access this footage." Naomi's face went pale. "You're saying that anyone, any random person, could be watching our backyard right now?" Ethan nodded grimly. "Not just your backyard. Every house with one of these cameras." Harry clenched his fists. This wasn't just an overreach by the HOA anymore. This was a privacy violation on a massive scale. They had assumed the cameras were for internal security, that the footage was monitored by the HOA alone. But if Ethan was right, that footage could be seen by anyone with the right link. Naomi grabbed a notebook and started writing. "We need to document everything, dates, details, screenshots, everything." Harry nodded. "And we need to tell the neighbors. If we don't stop this now, who knows what else they'll try to pull." They had started out looking for answers. What they had found was something far worse than they could have imagined. Naomi sat at the kitchen table, flipping through pages of notes while Harry paced back and forth. Ethan had already left, but the weight of what he had uncovered still hung heavy in the air. The cameras weren't just monitoring the neighborhood, they were broadcasting it. Harry stopped pacing and ran a hand through his hair. "So, if someone stumbles on that server, they can see everything? Any backyard, any driveway, any porch that these cameras are pointed at." Naomi tapped her pen against the notebook. "Not just stumble on it. If a hacker finds this, they could sell that access. Someone could be watching right now, and we'd never even know." She picked up Ethan's screenshots, images taken directly from the unsecured server. The grainy footage was time-stamped and live, showing their own backyard from the camera's angle. She felt a chill run down her spine. They had never consented to this. Harry exhaled sharply. "We have enough to go after them. This isn't just some HOA overreach anymore. This is a full-blown privacy violation." Naomi nodded. "We need a plan. First, we document everything. Every screenshot, every detail Ethan found. Second, we talk to the neighbors again. Some of them brushed it off before, but if they knew their kids, their homes, their lives could be seen by strangers, I think a lot of them would change their minds." She grabbed her phone and snapped pictures of the documents, sending copies to a secure email account. She wasn't taking any chances. Harry sat down beside her. And then, Naomi met his eyes. "Then, we go after the HOA." Harry and Naomi knew they couldn't take on the HOA alone. If they wanted to force change, they needed numbers. So they spent the next 2 days talking to neighbors, knocking on doors, and carefully explaining what they had uncovered. Some people were hesitant, still trusting the HOA to act in the neighborhood's best interest. But others, especially those with children or private backyards facing the cameras, were visibly disturbed. Jennifer Simmons, a young mother with 2 toddlers, was one of them. When Naomi showed her the screenshots Ethan had pulled from the unsecured server, her hands started shaking. "Are you telling me that anyone could be watching my kids play outside?" she whispered. Naomi nodded grimly. Jennifer covered her mouth, eyes welling with tears. "Oh my God." She turned and looked toward her backyard, suddenly seeing it in a different light. "I thought they were just security cameras for the front entrances." I had no idea. That evening, Harry and Naomi hosted a backyard meeting for concerned homeowners. Nearly 25 neighbors showed up, a far cry from the handful that usually attended HOA meetings. The air was tense as Harry explained everything: the cameras, the unprotected server, the fact that they were being watched without consent. Naomi passed around Ethan's findings, letting people see the evidence with their own eyes. The reaction was a mix of anger, shock, and disbelief. Some people cursed under their breath, others sat in stunned silence. "This isn't about security," one father muttered, shaking his head. "This is surveillance." An older couple, who had lived in the neighborhood for nearly 15 years, looked horrified. "We never agreed to this," the wife said. "This is our home. Who gave them the right?" Jennifer Simmons finally spoke, her voice trembling. "I want them gone." Every last one of them. Who do we need to talk to? That was all the push they needed. Right then and there, they started a petition demanding the immediate removal of the cameras. Naomi drafted it up on the spot, and neighbors lined up to sign their names. It wasn't just a complaint anymore, it was a formal challenge to the HOA's authority. As the night stretched on, the group discussed next steps. Some wanted to go straight to the media, others wanted to file legal complaints. One thing was clear, they weren't going to let this go. By the time the last person left, Harry and Naomi had a growing list of signatures and a neighborhood ready to fight back. The next morning, the neighborhood woke up to an official community-wide email from Teresa Carter. The subject line read, "Ensuring safety and preventing unnecessary disruptions." Naomi opened it immediately, already knowing what was coming. Dear residents, the email began, as you know, the Maplewood HOA has always prioritized the safety and security of our community. Recent discussions regarding our surveillance initiative have unfortunately led to misinformation being spread, creating unnecessary fear and division among our residents. The security cameras were installed with the sole intention of preventing vandalism and ensuring that all public areas remain safe. They do not violate privacy, and they comply fully with community guidelines. We are disappointed that a small group of homeowners have chosen to create conflict rather than embracing measures designed to protect them. To prevent further unnecessary tension, we will be implementing new community standards, including restrictions on unauthorized neighborhood meetings and distribution of misleading petitions. Residents with concerns may submit them through the proper channels, as outlined in the HOA guidelines. We appreciate your cooperation in keeping our neighborhood a peaceful and secure place to live. Harry's blood boiled as he read the words. She's trying to shut us down. Naomi exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Unbelievable. She's framing us as troublemakers, making it sound like we're the problem, not the cameras. Harry clenched his jaw. And now she's banning neighborhood meetings? That's not just controlling, that's pure intimidation. The response from the neighborhood was immediate. Some residents, especially those who had already signed the petition, were furious. They saw through Teresa's tactics and were more determined than ever to fight back. But others, the ones who had always supported the HOA, bought into her narrative. George Lane, the retired police officer, was one of them. "These cameras are here for a reason," he said when Harry confronted him. "If you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't have anything to worry about." Harry couldn't believe it. "It's not about that, George. It's about privacy, consent, control. My backyard isn't public property." George just shook his head. Safety comes first, whether you like it or not. The divide in the community was impossible to ignore. Some residents started avoiding eye contact with the Bennetts and others who had spoken out. A few neighbors even refused to sign the petition out of fear of HOA retaliation. Teresa's strategy was working. She was making it clear that anyone who sided against the HOA would be seen as a problem. But Harry and Naomi weren't backing down. That night, they gathered with their supporters, determined to find another way forward. The HOA had drawn its line in the sand. Now it was time to cross it. Harry and Naomi knew they were past the point of negotiations. The HOA had made it clear they wouldn't back down, so it was time to escalate the fight legally. Naomi spent the night organizing every document, email, and screenshot they had gathered, while Harry reached out to a lawyer specializing in property and HOA disputes. The next morning, they walked into the office of David Turner, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for taking on HOAs and winning. David listened carefully as they laid out everything: the cameras, the lack of homeowner consent, the vague newsletters, and, most importantly, Ethan's discovery that the footage was stored on an unsecured server. When Naomi handed him the folder of evidence, he flipped through it, nodding slowly. "This isn't just an overreach," he said, tapping the page showing the server logs. "This is negligence, possibly even a violation of privacy laws. You've got a case." David explained that HOAs often had strong legal protections, but they weren't untouchable. "The key here," he said, "is proving harm. You already have evidence that these cameras aren't just recording, they're storing footage in a way that anyone can access. That makes this a security risk for the entire community." The next step was going public. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, Harry and Naomi would put the pressure on them. They reached out to a local news station, and within hours, a reporter was at their house, interviewing them on camera. Harry showed them the screenshots of their own backyard being streamed from the unsecured server, while Naomi explained how the HOA had silenced homeowners and refused to address concerns. The reporter asked to speak with Teresa Carter, but she declined to comment. By the next morning, the news segment had aired, and everything exploded. The story spread quickly, not just in their neighborhood but across social media. Privacy advocates, legal experts, and even other homeowners dealing with overreaching HOAs began weighing in. Some called it an abuse of power, others a blatant privacy violation. The increased attention put Teresa on the defensive, but the worst was yet to come. Ethan, determined to help, dug deeper into the server logs. What he found changed everything. Not only was the footage unprotected, but multiple unknown IP addresses had accessed it in the past month. That meant that strangers, possibly hackers, possibly worse, had been watching private footage from homeowners' backyards. When Harry and Naomi brought this evidence to David, his reaction was immediate. This isn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This is a serious security breach. We're taking this to court. The Bennetts were no longer just fighting for their own privacy. They were about to take on the entire HOA system. The courtroom was silent as the jury filed back in. Harry sat rigid, his hands clenched together, while Naomi gripped his arm so tightly he could feel her nails pressing into his skin. Across the room, Teresa Carter sat with her lawyers, still holding on to the same smug confidence she had displayed since the beginning. But that confidence was about to shatter. The judge looked over the verdict, then cleared his throat. In the matter of Bennett versus Maplewood Homeowners Association, the jury has reached a unanimous decision. Naomi barely breathed as the judge continued. We find the Homeowners Association guilty of violating privacy laws and failing to protect resident data. The cameras must be removed immediately, and the HOA is ordered to pay $1 million in damages to the plaintiffs. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, a few stunned exclamations from the HOA supporters in the back. Harry exhaled sharply, hardly believing it. They had won. Naomi turned to him, eyes wide. We did it, she whispered, and for the first time in weeks, her voice wasn't weighed down by stress. The ruling was a devastating blow to the HOA. Not only did they have to remove every camera, but the judge also mandated that their bylaws be rewritten to include stricter limitations on surveillance. The precedent they had set wasn't just for their neighborhood, it was a warning to HOAs everywhere. Teresa Carter resigned in disgrace the very next day. The HOA board scrambled to salvage their reputation, but the damage was done. New leadership was elected, and the once intimidating HOA found itself suddenly on the receiving end of intense scrutiny from residents. The power they had abused for so long was now being stripped away, piece by piece. It took weeks for things to settle, but when the cameras were finally removed, Harry and Naomi felt something they hadn't in a long time: peace. One evening, as they sat in their backyard, the same place where this fight had started, Naomi sipped her tea and let out a content sigh. It's actually quiet again, she said. No cameras, no HOA emails, no threats. Harry looked around, taking in the warm glow of their string lights, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, and the privacy that was once stolen from them. He smiled. We took back our home. And that was all that mattered. The battle had been long, but in the end, they had stood up, fought back, and won.